The following information is intended for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. The views expressed do not reflect those of this broadcaster. Should you choose to implement this information, please do so only with the assistance of a licensed medical professional. Neither the presenter nor this broadcaster assume any responsibility for any adverse effects or consequences that may result.
As a young man, Josh Perry had already achieved his lifetime dream. He was an action sports athlete riding his BMX bike all over the world. But then he discovered something even better, something that would not only carve a new path for his career and his health, but would help others do the same. Josh Perry had discovered his new path quite literally by accident. And he's about to give you a health awakening. Welcome to the Health Awakening. I'm your host, Scott Laird. I'm a naturopath, I'm a husband, I'm a dad of 2 young adult kids, but I still love the sport of BMX biking. In fact, I still own a BMX bike and I ride skate parks whenever I can. And it was this love of the sport that led me to watching some BMX videos on Instagram where I stumbled across Josh Perry. Now, he's an amazing athlete, but his health journey is what really got my attention, and that's why I wanted to introduce you to him today. So Josh, welcome to the Health Awakening.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Now, you help, we'll talk about your BMX days in a second here, but right now you're helping people optimize their diet. You know, you and I are cut from that same cloth. Their health and performance is what you're interested in, but it wasn't always like this. So tell us your story and what led you to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts, Cape Cod to be exact, just playing school sports from whenever I could walk, I feel like. And when I lived at home, there was always home cooked meals. My parents did the best that they could to what they knew to cook, fresh meals. And when I left home, I was 17. I got this ultimatum from my boss, that I was going to a technical high school for landscaping. So I was working 2 weeks, going academics 2 weeks in the summer, working full time. But then I also turned pro my junior year and I was taking a lot of Fridays, Mondays off. And so I got this ultimatum to pick work or my dream. So with the support of my parents, surprisingly, I dropped out of high school, moved down to North Carolina, got my GED later on, and just started, living the dream and created a lot of success early on with my BMX dream. And it was 2009. It was I'd say my second year living on my own. It was my first year. I won my pro contest. Felt like a rookie year. I invented a trick. I won a Harley for that trick. I'd gone outside the country, outside of the continent, besides Canada. That's all I had ever seen was Canada. And I was just traveling the world and I was on TV, sponsorships, all these things. So one could say there was a lot of success and I was hiding this pain that I was going through with the success. And to me, that success meant this sense of freedom. So I was eating what I want now that I'm on my own. I was 17 at the time. So fast forward 2 to 3 years is this time period. So to me, whatever was the tastiest and cheapest and most convenient, that to me was my choice of food. So there was a lot of unhealthy lifestyle choices and habits formed while living my own, this freedom that came from the success. And ultimately, it led to a poor lifestyle that just was getting worse and worse, going to the doctor's office, complaining of headaches, migraines, vomiting, vision loss, like all these things. And every time I was written off as, being healthy, they would judge my cover. They'd say, you're young, professional athlete, quite healthy. Like blood work doesn't show anything. You don't need a scan, even though I'd ask for one. You just have headaches. It's quite normal. They send me home with pain pills, tell me to come back if I need more. And I did that until March 2010, just after I turned 21, hit my head one day while training, a trick gone wrong, got a concussion, and now an MRI was deemed necessary. That's when they found a brain tumor, and that just flipped my world in terms of how I lived it 180 degrees around. And so I just changed everything I could in my control, and I began auditing what I could do to improve myself. And that's what led me to, optimizing my health and performance and sharing that ultimately.
So you started, now this is not the only time you've had to deal with this. You had to deal with it a couple of times. So did you go the natural route the first time you were diagnosed?
So the first time was end of March, beginning of April 2010. And then April 16th, 2010, I went to Duke, had full open cranial surgery, removed the massive tumor. And then when they got in there, they found out it was wrapped around my optic nerve and a main artery, so they couldn't risk hitting either of them. So they weren't able to get all of the cells in the tissue. They did the best they could, but this is relevant because 2 years later, at the end of 2012, routine MRI showed 2 new masses had grown back on that same side, the left side of my brain, but one in the front and one in the rear of the skull. And they said it was due to those complications. They couldn't get all the cells, so it was just residual cell growth. They suggested radiation. I didn't like the sounds of it, very ignorant to it, but I saw my mom go through it. And although she hid a lot from us, it didn't seem like the way I wanted to go. So the stubborn me, which I've learned to embrace because it leads me to new ways of thinking and living, I took to Dr. Google and I found a technology called gamma knife radiotherapy, which is basically a precision laser-based form of radiation where they can target a specific location and there's no harm to surrounding tissue like there is with traditional radiation. Success rates were high. People return to work the next day. And that's what I used. But then 5 years later, to start 2017, after my best year competing 2016, after an ACL reconstructive surgery, the news to start 2017 was I had 2 new masses had grown on the opposite side of the brain. And they used a word that they thought it was a genetic disorder. So that word genetic stood out to me because in 2013, I read Dr. Perlmutter's book called Grain Brain, where he introduced epigenetics. And that was the first time I ever heard of that, which is the ability to change your gene expression through lifestyle choice.
All right. We'll be right back with Josh Perry. We're talking more about brain surgery and helping people through all kinds of difficulties in life after that with the Health Awakening. We'll be right back.
The third time I was diagnosed, I had already become passionate about nutrition. I've already been living the lifestyle, but I started learning what's called keto or ketogenic diet and the brain health effects of that, along with the lifestyle that keto properly requires.
And welcome back to the Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, BMX pro Josh Perry, about all things BMX and after BMX and a brain cancer diagnosis that led to a different life for him. And Josh, one of the first things you did after your diagnosis, I guess it was your third diagnosis, that you read a book called The Go-Giver. Tell us how that changed things for you.
Yeah, so with the third diagnosis, a friend eloquently put it for me, is like, man, your story is one of off self on purpose. So for up to that third diagnosis, the majority of my intentions were selfish, and that doesn't need to be negative, but it was self-driven. Like everything I wanted to accomplish in my life was for myself. The third diagnosis, which was the third wake-up call to something larger than myself, allowed me to walk away from that dream that was BMX that I was fulfilling to serve a higher purpose than myself, which was to serve and support other people with what I was learning, implementing, and the success I was seeing. And so I walked away from my dream with no plan, just this intention with purpose and passion. And I created my own business helping people optimize their health and performance because I believe that's what it takes to consciously design your life. And along that route of me working one-on-one with clients and just, finding my way, I read a book called The Go-Giver that was actually a gift from some friends. And it's, for those that aren't familiar, it's just a short story that goes over this business idea with a fictional story. And the main takeaway for me out of the 5 laws of stratospheric success they explain, the main one stood out to me was your net worth is determined by the amount of people you're able to serve and the value that you give them. And it got me thinking, I was like, man, I'm working with one-on-one clients. This is awesome. I'm meeting my needs and my wants and I'm helping people, but I'm not reaching as many people as I know I can. So it just got me thinking of different ways to share my story and my message and the information I had and work with more people at once. And that's where I am today. So I speak, I create content, I coach people, I coach groups. I've created online educational video courses with different ways to optimize health and performance. And it's led me to a place I never fathomed. I believe the journey is what uncovers our purpose. And if you feel like you're not clear on your purpose is to become the best version of yourself. Because in that process, you uncover things that you can serve other people with, which is what allowed me to save my life and find my purpose was BMX. And then now, what I do today.
What do you think people, when they come to one of your talks, what do you find most people want to know? They come to you, Josh Perry. Why? What do they want to know from you?
What I've gathered from people's responses and questions is that they just want to know something's possible. I think that's at the end of the day, our brains are always scanning for threats, and we're always telling ourselves we can't do something out of safety. It's really coming from a place of fear of the unknown. So that to us, and our unconscious mind is safety. And so for people to see what I call virtual mentors, that's what it took for me to believe in myself, was seeing someone like Dave Mira or Jim Carrey or Joe Rogan or, Kerwin Wright, whoever it is in any element of life, to see something that they were able to do, able to overcome, it built this belief in me. And we see that with BMX, with new tricks. All of a sudden, I remember Scotty Kramer did a tail whip to foot jam, which is a technical bike term. And then because I saw that, I was like, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, now I can do that. And I went and learned it a month later. It took me a month of trying it, but things like that. So I think at the end of the day, people just want to have the faith built in them by seeing other people that look like them accomplish something that they want to, or similar to them, that builds the belief that, hey, I don't have to have all the cards in my hand that are in my favor. I don't have to have all odds on my side. I'm able to overcome things depending on what I believe about myself and how I see the world and what I want to do. And so I think it's just seeing someone accomplish something and then having that belief in themselves.
Now, something we talk a lot about here on The Health Awakening is different types of diet. I've had a vegan diet. My wife is on a keto diet to overcome a thyroid thing that she has going on. I'm always trying to, change up what I'm doing as well. And you found that keto really works for you. What's the magic, do you think, of keto from what you've read and what you've experienced?
So for me, what stood out about a ketogenic diet, which is a diet that facilitates a metabolic response of producing ketones in your blood. It's very simple. For me, it was the neurological benefits. So people with TBI have a lot of benefit from ketones themselves. Just the average person can have benefits from ketones, but it was mostly that. And then it was really centered around how can I optimize my brain performance and my brain health and create longevity and reduce the risk factors that I've been experiencing manifested in my life. And then today I have this understanding that it's beyond just the ketogenic diet and creating ketones. At a cellular level, you're improving the function of your mitochondria, which are responsible for taking oxygen and food and creating our natural currency of energy in our body, ATP, which very technical. Most people will remember these terms, but really you got to know, it's not calories that fuels your body, it's ATP. So the quality of food is going to help that. So when you have a processed or ultra processed diet today, you're damaging mitochondria from things like inflammation and free radicals. So one that facilitates ketosis or creating ketones in your blood by nature cuts out virtually all the starches and the sugars and the processed carbohydrates, and you replace them with the healthier fats, the whole food carbohydrates like broccoli and salads and zucchini and all peppers and all these different things. But on the other end, it comes down to how your mitochondria is functioning. So someone like myself who has good muscular mass compared to fat mass, and I've been adapted to burning fat and creating ketones for some time, I can get away with having, a bunch of different sweet potato or even junk food. And because it's about how your body regulates the fuel. Most people in society today are so metabolically damaged, which is kind of an incorrect way of saying it, but people understand that they can't process the food that they're eating, and they have all this stored energy in terms of fat and carbohydrates in their body. So when you can reduce all those things, you can start burning your fat, you're going to be fueling your brain more optimally. You're going to be reducing inflammation, and you're going to be rejuvenating your mitochondria to where you're producing better quality energy at a higher level.
So do you find that being on such a diet helps you think better? Do you notice that you thought clearer as soon as you made that change?
I did see a lot of changes with just, how I thought, how my digestive system was, my body composition, my energy levels, not needing to eat food all the time, but still perform and train. And I think that that's one of my favorite pieces to talk about with people beyond the brain health performance aspects, is just about how better you can feel, because the energy of what you're creating in your body is elevated. And so you're going to naturally produce higher performance attributes.
All right, well, we're talking about diet and high performance and all things related to better health with Josh Perry, former BMX pro. We'll be back with more from The Health Awakening. Stay with us. And welcome back to The Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, Josh Perry, about all things ketogenic diet. And now, Josh, you've mentioned something about having a good mindset and taking care of your health and your body and that type of thing. It's not necessarily all about wearing a helmet. And so now I understand you are taking a full year off of BMX completely. And this is a kind of a new thing for you. So, and you said it had something to do with discovering who you are. And I thought by now, for sure, you'd be really solid in who you are. So that was kind of interesting to me. So explain that if you would.
Yeah, so it was before COVID happened. It was in the middle of January where I decided I'm gonna take some time off from riding. And that stemmed from when I left competition and I left, trying to get sponsors and working with sponsors and doing the shows and all that. Like I literally just rode my bike like I originally did just to have fun. And wasn't really progressing, but I was maintaining. I was still riding at an elite level. But then as I was transitioning to speaking and coaching and building my business, there was this part of me that kept finding myself back on my bike on a regular basis, still training, still going through all the same motions as my old identity knew. And that's just all the habits I formed that got me to that level. So when I was transitioning now to running my own business and speaking in front of hundreds and thousands of people around the world, I was finding myself in my comfort zone, which was BMX. It was my place of mastery for over 10 years. At that point, it was over half my life I had done that. And I believe it was taking away a lot of the confidence from this new path that I'm on. And I saw that with the anxiety and the overwhelm and the stress and the limiting beliefs that kept coming up and that I wasn't addressing. So I made a point on my own this beginning of this year in January that I wanted to take some time off. And I didn't have a set time frame, but then COVID, it hit, 2-3 months after that, depending on where you were. And I was like, man, let's just give this a year. And I hired on an NLP coach to work with me in my business and things like that. And all these things kept coming up that were root cause struggles or challenges I was going through. And it was all emotional trauma from my past that I never addressed because it was unconscious. And that's the thing I've learned, like when we're 0 to 12 is where most of our identity is formed based on things we're observing and feeling. We're not perceiving. We're not really having a choice in who we become until later on we get older and we're like, oh, like this makes sense. And so for me, it was just a lot of these limiting beliefs that were conditioned when I was younger. And I just was like, man, like I keep finding myself in this place of mastery, this place of confidence, and it's taking away from where I want to go. And I've become a really big fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And he talks about like breaking the habit of being yourself. Like if you want to get to a new place, you have to remove an old part of you. And a lot of us don't understand that unconsciously we're operating from this software system, if you will, that was given to us. We never had a choice. We didn't choose who we were born or the family we were born into. We didn't choose what we learned or all these things. But now as adults, consciously, we can choose. And so for me, it was just like, man, like I want to get to a new place in my life. And I want to do something more than just be known as the BMX rider. And I want to help more people. BMX served me well. It saved my life. It gave me this new purpose. It taught me so much. It brought me around the world. But is it serving me right now? And honestly, it was taking energy from me and it wasn't giving energy to me like it was before.
Well, that seems so ironic to me because BMX, I mean, flying up in the air and twisting around, you'd think that everyone would look at that and say, well, how the heck do you not have confidence? And how did that actually limit you? Because most people jump into a new career like you're doing, and that's the part that makes them hesitate. They're not saying it's the former that's causing it. So what about BMX was holding you back? I'm curious.
I've been learning a lot through interviews with like musicians and stand-up comedians and public speakers. And like Jim Carrey is a great example. Him and Shia LaBeouf actually speak on this. It's like you want to reach, fame and fortune to feel happy and to feel loved and all these things. But it's like Jim Carrey says, like one of his quotes is like, I had to reach fame and fortune to realize that it wasn't going to make me happy. And so with tying in the emotional root causes of my identity, BMX was my safety net when I was younger. It was my escape. And then it gave me a voice. It gave me the ability to receive attention from people, to receive praise and, oh, like, that's so crazy you do that. Like, that's so cool. Like all of these things that were building my ego, which was trying to keep me safe from insecurity. And so when I understood that and I uncovered that insecurity, I was like, all right, like there's no hate towards BMX. There's no negativity at all. Like I'm beyond grateful. If it wasn't for BMX, I believe I wouldn't be here today. But it wasn't even the BMX. It was what BMX was doing for me at an unconscious level emotionally. It was what I was getting out of it. And that's what it was. And so I just realized, I was like, man, like I don't need BMX to become who I am. Like I am who I am. what I do is an expression of my essence, if you will. Like I'm not the BMX athlete. I'm who I am. And that led me to riding my bike. That led me to doing this, having this conversation with you. It led me to starting my business with a purpose of helping other people. So it wasn't anything about BMX. It was how I perceived and approached it and what I got from it that I wasn't aware of until now. And so I was like, man, let's just take some time off and let's learn who I am. And every day I keep pulling a new layer back and a new layer and finding these emotional triggers, these root causes to who I am. And now what I'm doing to change it. And like I said earlier, Dr. Joe talks a lot about every time you catch yourself and you change yourself, the first step to changing is becoming aware, catching yourself doing something that you don't want to do or is not serving you. And then making a decision consciously in that moment. And each time you do that, you're building a new version of yourself. And that's what I'm doing today.
So when you get invited to speak somewhere, where's a typical place you're being invited to, and what do they want you to speak on?
Usually they want me to speak on overcoming fear and adversity and designing my life on my terms, or has something to do with health and nutrition. A lot of low carb ketogenic conferences have had me speak, and then some schools and businesses, things like that. And it's either one or the other. It's either optimizing health and performance, or it's optimizing your mind to achieve success in your life, depending on what that is defined by yourself.
Well, we're talking about reinventing yourself with Josh Perry. We'll be back with more from The Health Awakening. Stay with us. And welcome back to The Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, Josh Perry, about all things health and how to motivate yourself and just build a new life. And Josh, we're out of time, but I do want to give you the opportunity for people to understand where you're coming from, where they can get a hold of you, and how you can help them. So where do they go?
Yeah, so it's super easy, and I appreciate that. But it's just joshperrybmx.com, and then all my social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, whatever it is, it's all just Josh Perry BMX. Anywhere you shoot me a message, I'll see it and respond. And I always love connecting with people, hearing about people's stories, and just seeing what I can do to provide value in terms of inspiring some change in their life and ultimately living your ideal life.
Well, our guest today has been Josh Perry. Thank you for joining us very much. You can find him, like he said, at Josh Perry BMX. We'll see you next time on The Health Awakening. Thank you for joining us today on The Health Awakening. You can catch the replay of this episode and see our complete show archive at healthawakening.tv. For more information about our guest today and all they have to offer, please visit their website on the bottom of your screen. And please remember, the information you saw today is intended for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice, nor do the views expressed reflect those of this broadcaster. Should you choose to implement this information, please do so only with the assistance of a licensed medical professional. Neither the presenter nor this broadcaster assume any responsibility for any adverse effects or consequences that may result.